everybody. Welcome to another episode of Switch Movies. I am once again joined today by the amazing NightWatch Zone. Hello.
Woohoo! What's
I
going on?
don't know what the fuck that intro was. That was the sign of someone who's only had 4.5 hours of sleep.
Eh,
Bing. Sorry. Yes. Okay. So yeah, look. If you saw the last episode, you know I have a new co-host. That would be this gentleman to if I'm on the screen, that would be the right.
left, right, at this point, what does it really matter?
He's on your screen. That is all that matters. And today, getting right into it because this guy apparently he has a life and he has adult responsibilities and a job or something. I mean, I don't know what those are, but apparently he has them. So we're getting right into the crux of things today, and I selected today's theme, which was aliens, and there was some grief over this subject. I've never in my time of doing this series had such a hard time picking a movie.
Yes, you did. You really, really did.
I really, really did, because every time I suggested a movie, this jerk is like, oh yeah, I've seen it. Can you believe that? A person who likes movies, watching movies? Like, what the fuck? Anyway.
I know. How could you have ever guessed that would have happened?
I mean, because I know for a fact that if I was doing this with Ben and I'd, off the top of my head, when I'd said, okay, the theme today is aliens, and if I'd said Earth Girls Are Easy or Rocky Horror Picture Show, I know for a fact he'd never seen them, and we're like, bam, I'm picking those and I'm so happy. And then, of course, not shocked Night here has seen Rocky Horror Picture Show. If anything, I was more stunned Ben had not. That's just not okay. But when he's like, yeah, I've seen Earth Girls Are Easy, I'm like, son of a bitch.
Yeah.
I think I went through 50 films, and then
You really did.
I did.
You did.
And this jerk had seen all of them.
Yeah.
I originally had picked Queen of Blood to talk about, which is from the 1960s. But as good as I think that movie is, it's not something I actually wanted to talk about, or technically revisit. So I was just like, let me find something else. And best I could do was picking Jupiter Ascending, which this film is pretty much critically panned by almost everybody. It's a 2015 space opera, which I didn't know it actually fell into that category, but whatever, all good. It's directed by the Wachowski sisters, and it follows Mila Kunis's character Jupiter Jones, who is just a cleaning lady, and she comes into contact with Channing Tatum's character, who is called Kane Wise, who is an interplanetary warrior who basically turns her life upside down. And that's a simplification of the story. Yeah. So no, what'd you think of this one?
Well, what was funny is I had heard of this movie, and I knew a little bit about it, and I had actually planned to see it. It's funny, when you had said it, I was just like, wait a minute, did I see that? Because I had to remember. And it was a movie that I almost had seen. But I heard about it, and I like the Wachowskis. They're very talented. Huge fan of The Matrix, but this movie, as you said, was critically panned, pretty much across the board.
Pretty much.
I thought, yeah, I thought it was definitely ambitious, and there's no doubt about that. And they have a fantastic style and vision that they have throughout all of their movies. Some things work better in others throughout their filmography. But for me, this movie, it was pretty good. It was pretty good. I will say that I appreciated the largeness of the story. I appreciated, some of the action sequences. The Wachowskis are always good action, so that didn't surprise me. Um, the characters were a little, you know, two
Wooden.
dimensional.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, it was one of those movies when I finished watching it, I said, I probably should watch that again just to just to just to make sure that everything hit me the
Yeah.
way I thought it hit me.
Right.
But all of that being said, like you said, the characters were a little wooden. Channing Tatum, I mean, look, come on, let's just be honest about it. We all know he's not the greatest actor in the world. He's got charisma, and I think he did what he could with what he was given.
Hmm.
But the script, or I should say, some of the dialogue was kind of a little, So it's one of those movies that I was a little divided on.
Hmm.
But in general, it was a pretty fun watch. If you've got some time to watch a movie and you want to see a lot of spectacle and something that is trying to be, fairly creative and imaginative,
Hmm.
then it's a fun watch. It's definitely not a movie that I'm going to be like, oh, I'm going to watch this, over and over and over again. I think if they had a tighter script, and if the dialogue was a little bit kind of better, I think I think I think the movie would have been better.
Yeah.
I do know from what I heard, and you probably know a lot better than me, Ashley,
Maybe not.
um, that they were hoping to do a franchise, with this movie.
I can
And you
see
can
that.
kind yeah, and you can kind of tell, not to give away any spoilers, but you could tell at the end that they left some things open.
Hmm.
But the movie, from what I recall, the movie lost the studio like $100 million. So, it just, I mean, it was a bad time for this movie. Um, but that being said, again, I give the Wachowskis credit for, in all of their movies, and they're very divisive, as directors and producers.
Hmm.
But in all of their movies, I just give them credit for trying to do some new things,
Yeah.
or trying to do something that you don't see all the time,
Hmm.
and I think that you got to give them credit for that. It's very ambitious. I just wish that script could have been tighter. The
Hmm.
movie could have been, I don't know, maybe 20, 15 or 20 minutes shorter,
Yes.
you know and I think excuse me, I think that would have helped out a lot. Um and again, some of the dialogue, I mean, Mila Kunis, again, with her too, we all know she's not going to be winning any big awards for acting, but she does have charisma,
Hmm.
just like Channing Tatum. So I just wish that they could have helped both of them more with the dialogue and the script. And
Yeah.
I think if that had happened, the movie would have hit home better.
Hmm.
Um, I love Sean Bean. I always enjoy seeing him in movies. He played a nice little, role in the movie. And then you've got, well, I'll let you get into some of it too. I was gonna talk about Eddie Redmayne, but
Go for it. Go for it.
well, look, as far as villains go, again, they're trying to do something different,
Hmm.
and I don't know. His delivery was in one way kind of cool,
Hmm.
and in one way kind of like, all right, look, I don't know if I'm buying this, because
Yeah.
everything everything he said was kind of like a whisper,
Like
and
he's
it was
battling a
in
case
this.
of laryngitis.
Yes, and I'm like, and I'm like, look, and we know Eddie Redmayne is a good actor,
I'd
you
say the
know,
best one that cast had.
no doubt about it.
Yeah.
So whether or not that was something that he brought to the character, if it was designed to be like that, like I said, part of me was kind of like, well, this is a little different, I kind of like it.
Hmm.
But then the other part of me was kind of like, well, what's going on here? So again, this is a movie I'm probably going to have to watch again and see if it hits me the same way. But again, I appreciate the ambition, I appreciate the action sequences. the imagination. I just
Mhm.
wish that script could have been tighter.
Yes.
Wish the dialogue would have been better, and cut off about 15 or 20 minutes. And I think the movie would have been a better movie.
I absolutely agree with everything that you have said. It's a film that I think all of its biggest pros fall into the visuals. I think visually
Mm-hmm.
it's stunning. The effects
Mm,
are great. They really have done some really good world building. Even the costume department, I think, did a great job. They've created
mm-hmm.
something that it feels it's very fashion forward. So it's kind of very avant-garde, so therefore it feels otherworldly, but it also kind
Yeah.
of feels like something you might see at the Met Gala. It has that kind of thing where it's like it's unbelievable but believable at the same time, so it has a
Mm-hmm.
nice balance. But
Yeah.
yeah, visually everything is stunning, it's precise, and I would not expect anything less from Lana and Lily. That really is, I feel like, where they excel. Now,
Absolutely.
yeah, everything in terms of cons, I 100% believe is in the script. There's, like you said, it could have been shortened. I felt like there were one too many filler scenes that did not
Yes.
need to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets to a point where you're 1 hour into the film and there's a scene between Kane and Jupiter, and they're kind of trying to have this kind of emotional, flirtatious moment, and
Yeah.
there's zero chemistry in it whatsoever. It's the most
Yeah.
forced scene I've ever encountered.
I
But
have not seen I've not seen a flirt scene that bad since Anakin and Padme in Attack of the
on
Clones. I mean,
and yet I would still say Anakin and Padme were better.
yes, yes,
At least
yes,
at least you know they'd been working up to it, so it's not
yes.
that it wasn't that bad. And Anakin is just naturally
Hmm.
an awkward person. Plus he's a Jedi, so you know he's celibate. So it's like, what the fuck
Right,
does he know about chicks? But then you've got
right.
this guy, and I'm like, well, he's kind of half animal, so they should just naturally kind of have that kind of, mating kind of instinct somewhere in him. But
Hmm.
no, I'm like, well, I guess they
Hmm.
castrated him. But we get to this point and we're 1 hour into a 2 hour film,
Hmm.
and it felt like this is a scene that should be either in the third act or should have happened a lot sooner. And
Hmm.
so when you realize this is happening, it doesn't feel right to be happening right in the middle of the film. It
Yeah.
it made me quickly check the runtime, like, oh my god, there's another hour of this. Holy shit!
Hmm.
I'm like, there's one of the things that I love about Lana and Lily's work is if we look back at The Matrix, we're
Hmm.
creating a fictional world within a real world. And there's a great deal of brand new terminology. They have created their own mythology. It's very
Hmm.
vast, it's very detailed.
Hmm.
And as foreign as everything that we're going into is, we don't have any basis or understanding of what we're going into. I think that in that film, everything is really well explained to the audience that you can keep up really, really well. Like
Yeah.
it helps because we and the audience and Neo are on the same page, because as everything
Hmm.
is being explained to him, it's being explained to us, and it's being explained thoroughly yet quickly. So the pacing is really good. So we get to where we need to be and we're not feeling like
Right.
I have no idea what's happening right now.
Exactly.
Whereas in this film, I appreciate their attempts at creating this very vast mythology, this whole other planetary system with royalty and its
Hmm.
own its own clerks and paperwork and all
Yes.
that stuff. I
Yes.
appreciate all of that because it's really
Right.
going for realism. But mm, Jupiter is meant to be, from the audience perspective on this one, where everybody is filling her in, and therefore through her we should get to know what's going on. they're throwing out all these words and they're saying it so fast and explaining so many things that then they're saying things, but they're not actually explaining what they're saying. They're kind of talking to her as if she should automatically know what all this is, even while they're saying that she's human and that you'd be surprised how much you don't know. And it's like, yes, she doesn't know
Mm-hmm.
anything. None of us do.
Right.
Help us out here. And I don't
Yeah.
feel like they ever do. So we have all these scenes where they're explaining what this is, like when they're explaining that Jupiter is a genetic recreation or reoccurrence of their mother, and they're explaining what that is,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, oh, it's like reincarnation. I'm like,
Right.
but it's not. I'm like, you've
Mm-hmm.
said that, and that sounds like it's a good enough explanation, but because you keep going, you're actually now kind of telling me, oh, it's also nothing like reincarnation. So I'm like, well, now I'm just really lost. So the whole
Yeah,
thing is very, very confusing.
I
um
agree. I totally agree with you. It was again ambitious,
mhm,
but when you are presenting this to an audience, and
mm,
especially being a movie that is rooted in sci-fi,
yes.
and this is what's so important. Great sci-fi, like if you think about, the Star Wars movies or the Matrix
Mhm.
or anything like that, it's a very ambitious idea, but it is pared down in a way where anybody can follow it.
Yep.
And the pacing of the movies, the best of these movies, the best of obviously the original Matrix is the best. We know that the original trilogy is. Anyways, I won't get into that. But the the best sci-fi takes complex themes
Mhm.
and makes it easy for anyone to follow,
Yes.
you know and with this movie, it seemed like they would just kind of keep making it a little bit more complicated, a little bit more complicated. And like you were saying, next thing you know, you've got these scenes that run on for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and you're just still lost in the woods.
Mhm.
And it's like, come on guys, you got to break this down for me. I mean, no, nobody's a rocket scientist here, but at the same time, you guys are building a world and you're giving us rules, but then you're kind of changing them a little bit.
Yep.
So I have to really work harder to follow where you're going.
Yep.
And, when you think of Neo and the Matrix, you think of Luke Skywalker and Star Wars, they were basically our point of view
Yes.
character. And they were able to learn the rules of the worlds they were in, and it was very accessible to the audience. And that's why people that aren't even diehard sci-fi fans love those movies, or at least appreciated those movies. Whereas with this movie, I just don't think it was able to connect to the audience.
Yeah, it's kind of too intelligent for its own good. It has some really interesting characters, but in terms of this, like,
Mhm.
the three heads of the Abraxas family, I think that's what it was called, which is funny
Yeah.
because then that makes me think of Charmed. But you know, we get it. They all have different political agendas and they all
Mhm.
revolve around Jupiter, but it's like we're bouncing between the three and it gets very confusing as to what their actual ultimate goal is, because
Mhm.
one person's kind of like in the middle of setting it up before the next one comes along and takes her, and then it's
Yep.
it's it's like a freaking hot potato,
Mhm.
and it's very hard to understand them. I think the youngest of the family, his name I can't even remember because their name,
Titus.
thank you, Titus. Yeah, he probably gets the most opportunity that kind of explain things through lying to her. I think he explains things
Mhm.
the best. Um,
Mhm.
but as for his sister, I think that, yeah, she Kalik, I think her name was.
Mhm.
She breast six, that's it. But yeah, she does some good work and she explains a couple of things. Like each person explains another part of the story, but
Right.
at the same time, I still have no idea, like, was she just after Earth? Because if so, she didn't really do a good job at hinting at it. Like, she really was
Mhm.
so focused on playing up the friending part of her that she didn't really get to that part of the story. So I was lost.
Mhm.
Um, I love that this is a film where Sean Bean doesn't die. Congratulations to
Yes.
him. Um,
Yes.
that's a rare feat. I
I
think
know.
I think one of the things that this film starts off on the wrong foot is the entire opening of the film. I don't feel it was needed.
I agree. That's what I was thinking when I was done with the movie.
Because even though I'd already seen this and it was ages ago, as I'm rewatching it, I'd forgotten so much. So I'm watching it and I'm like, yeah, right. Doesn't it turn out like the dad was a part of this family and he left it and all this? And then I'm like, wow, I was way off.
Hmm.
Because the fact that he's so into astronomy and he's focused on it feels like they're setting up for it to be he's her dad, but he's from this other planet and he's,
Hmm.
he left there because he didn't like their way of life. It feels like it's going in that direction, which personally I think would have made a hell of a lot more sense than a genetic
Yes.
reincarnation.
Yes.
And then you find out that everything to do with the dad in that opening had nothing to do with any of the following events in the film. Like, okay, we really
Hmm.
didn't need any of that opening. You could have just
Yep.
started with I'm someone who was born without a father, without a country. Keep it at
Hmm.
that. You didn't
Yep.
actually have to watch the dad die because it has zero relevance to everything that happens in this film. So
Yep.
that's like 5-10 minutes you could have knocked off right there. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I appreciate that this is a film where Mila Kunis gets to show a lot of her mother tongue, which is good because Russian is her born language. Although I know that there
Hmm.
were some people in reviews who's like, "Oh, her Russian is so forced." I'm like, Russian was all she knew for the first 7 years of her life. What are you talking about? English is her second language. You people suck.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I don't think that she delivered as well as she could have. There was a lot of it was kind of very one note. Everything was very much the same.
Hmm.
And there are films she does where I like, which I think she does comedy really well, even whether it's
Yeah.
voicing Meg Griffin or in The Spy Who Dumped Me. I think that she's got comedic timing, Bad Moms as
Hmm.
well. But in this
Yes.
film, you need more levels, and I didn't feel like she was hitting any of them. I think Channing Tatum did better at kind of putting some emotion into his character than she did.
Hmm.
But then when
Yeah.
they come together, there is just no chemistry. Like we get they're leading to like, oh, here's like they're gonna love each other, and I'm like,
Hmm.
why do they love each other
Yeah,
exactly?
exactly. It was like, why?
Yeah, where did that come from? It doesn't feel right. And then they're trying to insert comedic moments into it, like when she's just like, I love dogs. And it's like, oh God, why did I say that? I'm like, yeah,
That was
why
the
did you say that?
Oh my God. When I saw that, I was just like cringing so hard. I was like, really? Come on, man. Like she said that part where they're looking at each other and it's like, granted, there wasn't a lot of chemistry, right?
No.
But if they could have just maybe said something that made a little bit more sense, it would have worked. But instead she's like, do you feel like biting me right now? And I'm like, what the fuck, man? Come on. I mean, seriously,
Mm,
so yeah, they missed out on some serious moments. They really, really did. I
they
mean,
did.
the dialogue did not help them whatsoever. But you're right.
It did not.
Channing Tatum had some moments where he was able to stretch a
Mhm.
little bit
Yeah.
and put something into the role, into the movie. So
I agree with you about Eddie Redmayne. I like what he was going for. I just don't feel like he completely executed it. And I think that that's less to do with his choices and more directing because there's always that moment
mhm,
where the director should really stop and say, "Okay, I think you should do this instead of this." I love
right.
that he was going for someone who's very emotionally unstable. And so
Hmm.
they come off as very apathetic until they lose control. And that's when
Right.
they completely snap. So he is very much playing a psychopath because that is very much what a
Hmm.
psychopath would be like. Or is it sociopath? I'm always getting those two confused. One of them is emotionally unstable, one doesn't have emotions at all. Um,
Right.
so I appreciate the apathy and the that he can go from one extreme to the other. But what I don't necessarily agree with the execution. Like I don't agree with playing apathy as quiet. I don't think
Hmm.
that worked. You can play
Hmm.
apathy and still have volume. So
Right.
yeah, that didn't work for me. And I was every time I'm like, Hannah, Lily, one of you go to him and say, we love what you're doing, but if you could just turn up the volume a little bit,
Just a little bit.
that'd be great.
Right.
And then the whole revealing that he's the one who killed his mother, that felt really rushed. I'm like, that's
Yeah.
a plot that I feel like you should have started inserting breadcrumbs in a little earlier instead of just that
Mhm.
one moment where he's looking at Mila Kunis's character and kind of you realize he's talking about his mom and looking at her and it's like you were the only one who
Mhm.
understood me, yada yada yada. I'm like, who
Right.
is he talking about? What is going
Right.
on? And then it's like, oh yeah, he murdered her. I'm like, well, those two do not go together at all. Like, how can you say
Right.
you were so this for me? You were the only one who understood me. P.S. I murdered you.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Okay, you've got issues, but we already knew that. So
We did. We
so
surely did.
so yeah, there's a lot of interesting things that I appreciate. I love the whole story of, Earth basically being like a farming planet and we're being
Mhm.
harvested. I appreciate that. I even like the thing with the bees where bees recognize royalty. That was kind of fun.
That
But
was. I thought
but
they were gonna go somewhere with that too. A
yeah.
little bit more.
Yeah, that's a shame. But
Yeah.
yeah, so there were nuggets where I'm like, you didn't go far with that, or they went
Mhm.
too far with other things. Even some of the action scenes, they're great, but then they go on for so long when there's no emotional weight or context to them. And so it's just like, you guys can stop
Stuff.
flying around the city now. We get the
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
It's becoming just a chance to show off some effects. That's like, yeah, but we got the point already. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Right.
So
You could have saved yourself $20 million there, buddy. You know.
exactly. So yeah, I appreciate what this film was going for. I love it
Mhm.
visually, but story
Mhm.
wise, it's very kind of convoluted, it's complicated, and
Mhm.
we're missing a lot of chemistry or anything to invest in the characters, and that makes it very
Yeah.
unfortunate. Also, I
Mhm.
cannot forgive Mila Kunis for putting a pad on the wrong way. I can't do it. I cannot. You're a woman. How did you not know to put it on the correct side up? And then Sean Bean ripping it off, and you hear that. And I'm just going, yeah, that means she put the adhesive side down, which means it ain't absorbing shit. So
Oh.
I'm sorry. That was my takeaway from the film. I took a screenshot and I'm like, yeah, no, I don't forgive you for this. So
Yeah. You're out, man. You're out.
out of 5, what would you give this film?
Oh man. God.
It's the hard
Well,
questions.
again, I'm so divided on the movie,
Mhm.
the good and the bad of it, that I guess I'll just say a 2.5
Okay.
out of 5, because again, I loved the action, I loved the creativity. The creativity and the imagination was
Mhm.
so nice to see because I really enjoy that when you talk about sci-fi. But again, the script, the dialogue, some cringy moments, um, those just those just counterbalanced it. So yeah, I'd go with 2.5 out of 5.
I'm pretty close with you on this one. I'm a little bit more generous and I'd give it a 3 just because I did feel the visuals were so impressive. There was very clearly a lot of green screen going on and I felt like
Yeah.
for the most part it was pretty seamless. Like there are a
Hmm.
couple moments between Jupiter and Eddie Redmayne's character who again, see, I don't remember anybody's names in this because they're all very
Ballum.
complicated. Thank you, Bella. Yes. Yeah, he between them there were some moments where I'm looking at her and I'm like, "Oh, I can see that kind of outline around you, so I know you're on a green screen right now." But
Hmm.
most of the time very seamless where you could almost believe that this set was completely built when it wasn't because they're in outer space.
Right.
But
Yep.
but yeah, everything else is just so lacking to the point that it doesn't interest me enough to want to revisit it, which is
Hmm.
a shame because there was a lot of potential here. It's just you really
Hmm.
needed to it really needed that script needed to go back to the drawing board and like
Mm.
a rewrite was a little bit needed. So I'd give this a 3 out of 5. Yeah, it's okay, but
Right.
it's not really worth revisiting. Sorry, ladies. Um, but but that of course brings us to Knight's pick for me. So please, what did you pick for me?
I went with Under the Skin, starring Scarlett Johansson.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yes. So because apparently it's all my job to do everything. So Un- Under the Skin is a 2013 science fiction film. It's directed by Jonathan Glazer with a screenplay by Walter Campbell and Glazer, and of course is based on the 2000 novel by Michael Faber called Under the Skin. So there we go. And
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
follows an otherworldly woman, we believe her to be an alien, who preys on men in Scotland. This
Hmm.
and yeah, I've been putting off watching this one for, well, I guess since 2013. It's
Now
always
wait a minute. Whoa, 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 whoa. Now why have you been putting it off? You gotta let me know.
I don't like Scarlett Johansson.
Oh, okay. Now see, I didn't know that. I didn't
Oh,
know that.
but hey, I'm I'm a person. I'm not insane. I do not let my biases get in the way of certain things unless it comes to
Okay.
Charmed, in which case that's a completely different situation.
Nice.
So, what are your feelings on Under the Skin, and why did you pick it?
Well, well, first of all, well, the reason why I picked it is because when you brought up the whole idea of aliens, and you were talking about me seeing all the choices that you gave, you had seen a bunch of the choices I gave too. So I was
You
just like,
didn't
well,
list
what?
that many by
No,
comparison.
no. I didn't list nearly as many as you, but I was listing a few, and then I was like, all right, I got to come with something from left field,
Hmm.
and that's how I kind of came upon Under the Skin. This movie was a movie. It's one of the few movies, at least I don't know, in the recent years. I don't know how many, but maybe 8 years or so, where I went into it and I didn't know anything about this movie.
Hmm.
All I knew was that Scarlett Johansson was in it. And so, and I think maybe someone told me to check it out. That might have
Hmm.
been how I got to it. And I was watching it, and this movie is it's weird. And when I say weird, I don't mean to have that have a negative connotation to it.
Right.
It was just something that was really
Different.
different. And right from the beginning, the musical score was haunting, um, otherworldly,
Hmm.
and it was just it was taking me on a ride. And right from the beginning, and as the movie, kind of went on, and her portrayal of this alien was very alien. Like, I mean, I, I will give her a lot of credit. Obviously, this is not a movie that was going to be award winning, or as far as the script work or the dialogue or whatever, because she doesn't have much that she says.
That is true.
Um, but the physicality of it, sometimes the looks that she gives, it almost reminds me, because I was just talking about this on my channel. We were just talking about um the Terminator, and with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Hmm.
And in that movie, he doesn't say much of anything either, but his physicality, the way he looks, the way he turns his head as he's trying to analyze things,
Hmm.
um, she had some of that same vibe for me as a viewer. So I was really invested. And then, of course, and not to get into any spoilers yet, but as things were happening, especially to the men she was preying upon, there were moments where I was like, what? Like, things were happening that really surprised the hell out of me. So bottom line, this movie, it was weird, it was different. It had some creative flavor to something that we've seen 1,000 times. We've seen aliens come to the world 1,000 times, and they're doing whatever. but this movie really felt different.
Mhm.
And that's what made it always stand out to me as a movie. So that was my thought on it.
I Now this is something Ben used to criticize me for. I had read the entire plot on Wikipedia, and he would always say, "Why do you do that? I don't understand why you do that. That's so stupid." Because I have a very compulsive curiosity about things. And if there's
Hmm.
something I'm very curious about, but not necessarily intrigued enough to want to watch it, I'll go
Hmm.
and read the entire plot. That's just what I do. And I did that ages ago, and I'm just like, okay, interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't feel like I need to watch this. I'm good. Sometimes I get curious enough. I'm like, maybe I will watch this. So,
Right.
it's an analysis thing for me.
Hmm.
And yet going into it, and then the first couple of minutes, I'm like, what is happening here? I'm like,
Right.
I don't even know what's on my screen right now.
Right. I
Um,
know. I know.
I still don't know. And and then we meet Scarlett Johansson. We're seeing this, and she's getting dressed, and then of course the first thing that I'm thinking is this is happening, and I'm like, bullshit, that bra fits. That that was my first thought. So yes, interesting how with both films my reaction is to things circling around women's anatomy. But I do stand by it. Bullshit that you just took this random body and it just so happens the bras are the same size. Do you have any idea how hard it is to find a perfectly fitting bra? That is bullshit. Anyway,
Preach, girl. Preach. Preach it.
that being said, going through this film,
Hmm.
and like I said, I'm not a fan of Scarlett Johansson. For most of the
Hmm.
films, I don't think she's that good of an actress. I think with
Hmm.
most of her films, and there's a reason why I'm saying this, I think with most of her films, she gives the same performance.
Hmm.
It's always the same thing, maybe different color hair and a different outfit, but the delivery is all very much the same.
Hmm.
The ones I didn't even really start to really love her in the MCU. I loved her action scenes. I love the
Hmm.
Black Widow character. I didn't necessarily love her until Endgame, and I'm just like, yay, I love her now. And I'm like, and you killed her. Thanks very much. I didn't. The first film that I genuinely loved her was Ghost in the Shell, and I know a lot of people had issues with that film, but
Hmm.
I was just like, I feel like she's kind of built to play kind of a robot of sorts. And I didn't mean that as an insult. I genuinely
Right.
thought she really did a good job in that film. And then we come
Hmm.
to this film, and I'm gonna say it again. I think she did a really good job in this role. So I guess aliens and robots, people who can't exhibit emotion, are her thing. Interesting. I don't know what that says
Hmm.
about her. But I'm not
Right.
gonna say anything. I'll leave that to interpretation.
Hmm.
But she I, I would call this the best performance of her career. I would honestly say that. And again, this is coming from someone who's not a fan of hers. I don't even like her personal values, but that's neither here nor there because we're not here to talk about that. That doesn't matter. It's This is going to be so weird, and I don't know anybody who's ever said this about this film. I found this film to be very relaxing.
No, I get what you mean about that. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's because this film, and I've kind of mentioned this in the past with certain films, there's a lot of films that feel like you have to have an abundance of sound and sound effects and audio cues and music and all this stuff, and this film has a different approach where it uses sound when sound is needed, but outside of
Hmm.
those moments it completely removes them, and not in a way that is even creepy or disturbing. It's a very natural silence. And thinking back on
Hmm.
it, I would say it's almost like an echo of space itself. There is no sound in space. There's nothing.
Hmm.
So it's very much that, but it's not creepy, it's not disturbing, it's not
Hmm.
uncomfortable. It's very serene.
Yeah.
And probably because we are
Absolutely.
so used to sound and being surrounded by it, and sound pollution is in fact a thing. So kind of having those absence of sounds just kind of give you a moment to take in what's happening and kind
Hmm.
of block out extra noise and focus something that's on the visual. And
Yeah.
guaranteed there are some films I've watched where there's like no score going on something. Like I think that was the original Dracula film doesn't have a score and they only put it in many years later. I watched it
Hmm.
without a score and I'm like, no. I'm like, nope, you needed one. This doesn't feel right.
Right.
I don't like it. This is different. Completely different. There's cases where you need it, and obviously this shows that there are cases where you don't. Um,
Right.
and so in all that, it made me feel very lulled into this kind of relaxation. It was almost hypnotic, but not quite. And
Yeah, absolutely. I felt the same exact way when I was watching it. I just felt like I couldn't take my eyes off of it,
mhm,
and but it wasn't like it was hitting me over the head
yeah,
with what was going on. It was very minimalistic,
mhm,
but not to the point where it wasn't interesting. And it again, it was very hypnotic. You know, the way she played her character
yes,
was very there was a charisma to it, even though it was a physical performance
mhm,
rather than a lot of dialogue and all that type of stuff. It was, like I said, it was a movie when I remember when I finished watching this movie, you know, whenever it was years ago, I called up my brother and I was like, listen, you have got to see this movie. He didn't know what it was either because this movie didn't have a lot of, you know,
mhm,
fanfare and all that type of stuff. And he was like, well, what is it about? I was like, I don't want to tell you, dude. I don't want to tell you. Just watch the movie. He watched the movie and called me back after he had finished it. And the movie's only, I think it's like an hour and 45 minutes or something
mhm.
like that. And he called me back after he was done. He was like, holy shit, what just happened? And I was like, right? But it wasn't in a bad way.
Yeah,
It was in a way where it's like, wow, this was an interesting journey. And it was done with a style and an artistic flair that seemed fresh, you
mm,
know. And this is old stomping ground. This story, the plot of it, you know,
yeah,
it's old stomping ground. We've seen it 1,000 times, but it was done in a way, and even the finale of it, you know. And again, not to get into the spoilers of it, but even the finale of it was kind of like my jaw literally dropped,
mm.
and I was like, wow, bravo. That's exactly what I thought when I finished this movie.
Yeah,
It was really good.
the end of this film does kind of has some parallels with the ending of Annihilation, but Annihilation, I'd say that ending is on a grander scale, but they're very, very
Hmm.
similar in what they're doing. But this film has a lot of themes to it, and based on
Hmm.
what I was able to read up, it actually has, I'd say it only tackles about maybe half of the themes that the book does. So
Hmm.
that's interesting. There was a lot that they took out, and I'm wondering, wow, if they had kept all those things, this film would have been really full on. It would not have been the film that we ended up getting.
Hmm.
But what we did get, you can look at it and go, well, that theme is obvious, or you can look at it and not see those themes at all. It's one of those things where it's like, yep, cool, this is a really important topic, but it's not hitting anybody over the head or shoving it down your throat. So you can
Hmm.
watch it and just be like, hey, I watched a film. Or if
Hmm.
you're someone who's a bit more intellectual and you see those things, there's nothing against anybody who doesn't. It's our brains
Right.
just work differently. So
Hmm.
you can go either way. So it really can work for any type of person. But
Yeah.
I mean the subjects on you can't say that they're not there. There is a very clear subject about sexism, rape culture that you can't say that's not there, especially with
Right.
the end scene. That's there.
Yes. It's
But
definitely there.
it's a very interesting way through not saying anything, using for starters, using interesting effects that I don't particularly think I've seen before, and
Hmm.
relying on camera techniques and even very specific camera angles to make it feel very, since a lot of it was actually using hidden cameras in real life settings, you could feel that because it genuinely
Hmm.
kind of felt like, hey, like when she's at the mall, I'm like, nobody knew this was happening because I feel like
Right.
I'm at the shopping center right now.
Yep.
So
Yep.
there's moments that feel very honest, but because there's one person involved who's acting and nobody else is, at the same time, it feels alien. So it works. It's
Yeah, it definitely worked. I
it's
agree.
totally on brand. And there are a couple moments that make me uncomfortable, especially, oh my God, that poor child being abandoned. Oh, that was
I know.
that
When,
that was hard.
it was, and I'm gonna tell you what, when I saw that scene, it really got to me because the way that whole scene played out, like it just didn't go the way you thought it was gonna go.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when the surfer guy, he kind of came back to shore and he was so wiped out and he couldn't do anything. And then obviously she did what she did to him. And it was like, wow, it was like a bam type of moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then you hear the baby crying, and I'm like, uh-oh, and you're wondering what's going to happen. And then no, the baby is just left there, and you don't know what's going to happen until the next scene. We see that it becomes nighttime, and the motorcyclist is getting the rest of the belongings right there on the beach, and the baby is still there,
Mm.
still crying. And it's like, wow, once that really sinks in, you're just like, that's terrifying. That's a terrifying moment that wasn't done over the top. It,
Mm-mm.
it didn't it didn't hit you upside the head with it. It
Mm-hmm.
was just very, again, very minimalistic. And as you're watching it, it really hits home. I was just like, wow, that is that. And it also showed for her character, she had some multiple sides because you could see the curiosity that she had
Mm-hmm.
as she was analyzing human behavior, as she was watching human interaction, like she was learning and so forth. So there was that, almost that naive, childlike thing going on as
Mm-hmm.
she's learning. And then of course she had her moments when she was preying upon the men, that she was very, you know sexual and very aggressive and so forth and so forth. But then you had moments like at the beach scene where she was scary. She was very brutal.
I'd call her in business mode.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
absolutely.
basically by the end of the film, she's basically an alien having an existential crisis.
Mm-hmm.
She's gotten to a point where she's actually kind of questioning her job or obligation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very interesting that by observing humanity, all the good, all the bad, which I'd say there's a pretty even balance of both. Um,
Mm-hmm.
she's kind of wondering what, like, maybe like what her job is, what is she actually doing. And because we,
Mm-hmm.
at one point we don't see her get a connection with any of the other characters until we come across the man who is disfigured. And that's the only time she actually really kind of connects with someone. And that was
Yes.
enough for her to kind of go, I'm not
Yeah.
sure anymore.
Yep.
And that did not end well for her. Thanks to humanity, we suck. Where it's kind of like, yeah, you probably should have just stuck to your job. We're really not worth it. Just
Mm-hmm.
keep killing us. We're good. Yep, send us to the meat factory. That's perfectly fine. I don't blame you.
Right.
Um,
Right. Right.
be
But the way that was done was very, I thought it was very smart the way it was done, because again, there's no big dialogue scene, there's no
mm,
big exposition. You know what's going on when she meets the disfigured man. You understand what's going on inside of her, the way she's thinking about, like you said, the way she's looking at humanity, and how she's having issues with what she's doing. And again, I give a lot of credit, like you said earlier, to her performance, because it all made sense without even saying a word, without any, some films, especially in sci-fi, and obviously we were just talking about Jupiter Ascending. Some films go through all this explanation,
mhm.
and it starts out really cool, but next thing you know, a minute later, all the explanation starts to not make any more sense,
Yeah.
and like you said, it's almost like it's maybe too smart for its own good. This movie, in comparison, very minimalistic, and you get all you need from these moments, her physical portrayal and the way that the movie kind of went. So it's and this was not planned, because again, we were trying to figure out which movies we were
The
going to
struggle
talk
was
about.
real.
The struggle was beyond real, folks. It really was. It really was.
It was.
But but it's funny how these two movies that we're talking about have different approaches
Mm.
to trying to explain what it's about, to try to explain, the imagination of the film, and what's going to make it stand out from other sci-fi films. So yeah,
Could
this
not
movie was very good
could
with it.
not agree more. By the time I finished this film, I was thinking, amazing. Jupiter Ascending says so much, and yet makes no sense, and
Right.
don't understand it. And what? And then there's this film that says so much by saying virtually nothing. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's amazing. Like, Jupiter Ascending is basically kind of a film that deals with commercialism and things like that. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
well, if you say that, I guess I can kind of see it. But if I was meant to walk away and go,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's of course a metaphor for commercialism, I would not have gone that route. Not one iota. But if I look at this film and I'm just
Mm-hmm.
like, this is a really
Mm-hmm.
interesting, lots of themes, but of course, the one I took away from the most, I wonder why, is sexism and rape culture. And there were things that when Scarlett Johansson's character is speaking, there's very clever choices in the dialogue, which
Mm-hmm.
is especially when she's deciding which men to pick. And I don't know if everybody picks this up,
Yes.
but when she's asking certain questions, and it sounds very friendly and all that thing, to women, every question that she is asking this general, women are trained to see these questions as red flags. We are taught that if a
Mm-hmm.
man
Mm-hmm.
comes to you and asks you any of these questions, do not answer them or lie, because these are
Mm-hmm.
not benign questions. These are questions to determine, are you alone? Are you an easy target?
Yes.
Will anybody do
Right.
anything if you go missing? These
Right.
We learn that these are red flags. And
Absolutely.
I've listened to some Reddit stories where someone is just like, yeah, this guy was chatting me up and it's like he was asking me this, and I'm like, oh honey, lock your doors. It ain't gonna end
Right.
well. We get to the end of the story. It's like, yeah, I didn't realize that. I'm like, how'd you not know that? Like, no,
Right.
no stranger casually just asks you, so do you live alone? Do you have
Yeah.
a dog? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, someone would typically ask, hey, do you own a pet? Like, oh, cool, what's your
Yep.
pet's name? No, these are very methodical questions. And she does this. She stops,
Yes,
she
she
asks
does.
certain people, and anytime the person says that they have a family, they have a girlfriend,
Mm-hmm.
they have a job, anything like that, she pretty much avoids them. So she
Mm-hmm.
has enough intelligence, or has been trained enough on how humans act and what will not draw attention to her. So she knows
Right.
that. And the thing, but also her alien cohorts have enough knowledge on human behavior to know that they were smart to make her a woman and not a man, because if it was a man doing this to women, it would not have worked. Every
Right.
woman would have been like, oh, creepy random dude in a van. No, thank you. Not
Mm-hmm.
interested. Whereas guys, and this is nothing against guys, this is just a difference on how our culture is. Guys are not brought up to see women as a threat.
Right.
Guys are not brought up to see a woman on the street at night as a predator. They're not taught
Mm-hmm.
to be cautious when a woman comes over and talks to them, or a woman
Right.
driving in a van. All of these things, which everything she does is what women are taught to avoid in men, they've written into this character, and not a single guy hesitates to get in the car. They will
Mm-hmm.
get, she offers them a lift, like, sure, why not? Guys are
Right.
even threatening and trying to intimidate her because,
Mm-hmm.
again, they don't view her as a threat, not realizing she's an alien who's literally out to kill them.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're taught two different ways. And it's interesting that an alien race observed us well enough to see that and use that. It was very, very clever. And so, in those little choices and seeing her and the times when she speaks, it really, for me, rides that home of, yeah, there's a very clear difference in, if you had made this character a male, you wouldn't be able to do
Hmm.
any of this. It would not work.
Right.
It would not happen. You wouldn't have the story that you have. So everything is very minimalistic but methodical.
Yes.
And I appreciate that. So I appreciate everything that it's doing. And then even by the end of that, it's like, yeah, she was an alien, but guess what? Creepy dude trying to rape her ended up being the downfall. It's like, see, you thought you were smart picking a woman, but that also has its downfalls. So
Right. Yeah.
so that's
Yep.
unfortunate. But
Yeah.
I
The
was
movie is definitely holding the movie is definitely holding up that mirror to just humanity and
totally.
how we operate.
Mm.
There's no doubt about that. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I would say this was a brilliant film, even if sometimes you don't necessarily understand it. I
Hmm.
feel like
Hmm.
you can kind of be okay not understanding it and just kind of go along
Yes.
for the ride and the intricacies of something that is so different to everything
Hmm.
else. And like I said, despite having some moments where I'm like, ooh, that made me uncomfortable, for the most
Hmm.
part, I'm like, this is oddly relaxing and soothing. So it's easier to take in all of those things. The only con, and it's really a really small con, is that I thought it was really strange that when Scarlett Johansson's character is, you know, trying to rope in these guys, she can make conversation. By the way, brilliant British accent she did. That was like flawless.
Yes. Yes.
When she's talking to them, she can make engage in conversation. She sounds very good at interacting
Hmm.
with people. And yet, when she's not being the predator, when she's just kind of going along for the ride, suddenly she loses the ability to talk. And I find that very strange. I don't
Yeah,
understand
that
why
was
she
weird.
can talk in these
I-
situations, but not in others.
Yeah, and I thought about that too. And one of the last things I'll put out there about it is part of me was wondering, was it because like maybe there was like an overload for her as far as I don't know, the moment
Mhm,
or stimulation or maybe a tug of war with her, conscience wise or something. Because I was trying to get that too, and I think it's left ambiguous, which is kind of
mhm,
cool because I've watched this movie a few times over the years, and every time I've watched it, I'm kind of getting, some different flavors throughout the movie. And that's one thing that always I'm trying to guess is like, why is that? And
mhm.
and but again, without even trying to answer it or whatever, I think that's what makes the movie pretty cool. Is that you have these open-ended things going on with it, and you can kind of watch it, at one sitting and get something out of it, and then when you revisit it down the road, you can get other things out of it. So,
Mhm.
but I agree with you. I was always kind of intrigued by that as well.
Yeah,
It really was like, why is that?
it's very rare. Very few films I feel can pull this off, where you can have an audience asking questions
Hmm.
and yet feel okay not getting answers.
Hmm. Yes.
You know, there's so many films I leave them like, well, I don't know X, Y, Z. I don't know A to Z. Like Jupiter
Right.
Ascending. So many questions. I didn't get any answers, and I'm frustrated because I want them. And then there's this film where I have some questions, but I'm okay not having those answers because it didn't overload me. I'm like, well, there wasn't really
Right.
that much to look into. So what if I don't
Mhm.
understand one, two things? I'm like, maybe I'm just dumb. So
Exactly. Yeah.
on the whole, I would probably give this a 4 out of 5.
Nice. Wow. Very,
Yeah,
very
I
cool.
I
Good.
honestly didn't think that I was gonna like this, and I thought I was gonna be like, "Shit, of course, it's another Scarlett Johansson film I don't like."
Damn
Um,
it, he said a Scarlett Johansson film. I knew he would do that. No, I'm just joking.
but no, great themes,
Yes.
intricate, unique,
Hmm.
um, does a lot of different things, and
Yeah,
Scarlett Johansson actually freaking nailed it. So yeah,
I
4
think
out
so
of
too.
5 from me.
Well, it's funny that you said that because I was thinking the same exact thing. I give it a strong 4 out of 5. And yeah, I mean, again, I think that she put in a very, very nice performance. The movie was very creative. Uh, I think you had said it earlier. You were seeing things, the effects, things happening in a way that was very fresh
Hmm.
and creative. The minimalistic approach I thought was very effective. So many themes that you can, take away from it. And it wasn't hitting you, it wasn't preachy or hitting you over the head. And I appreciate that. So
Mm.
this is definitely a movie that very impressive to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say this I'm going to call this episode a slam dunk because we agreed on everything. One score was off by half a point, but on the whole, we
Yes.
didn't disagree on anything. Despite these being two completely different films, and
Yes.
this one not being in my wheelhouse, especially considering it was in the US distributed by A24, and I loathe pretty much all their films. And I was just like, oh no, this is gonna be bad. I've been down
I
this road
was
before.
I'm not gonna lie, I was waiting to see what you were gonna say about this movie because when I said it to you and you were like, I forgot what you said. I think you said something like, "Of course you're gonna pick that" or something like that. And I was just thinking, well, all right, shit. I mean, let's see what happens. So I was really curious
Right.
to see what you were gonna
I've
think.
started the bar and it's like, well, if she hated Scarface, what's she gonna hate next? But no, so I'm really surprised. It's also kind of I'm also a little resentful that I liked it just because oftentimes when it's like everybody is just like, wow, this film is amazing. And then I agree with them and I'm like, I don't want to agree with you. I don't like it. Like I can be a petulant child at times. So, but I can't lie. You know, where people try to say, oh my God, someone paid her to say this. I'm like, I wish. But whatever I feel, and I can't lie about it. Like, my God, like, come on, who's going to actually intentionally say they hate Scarface and risk the wrath of the internet? Come on.
Right? I
Nobody
know, I
chooses
know.
that path unless it's true and they can't lie. So,
That's
yeah,
right.
I'd say we did great in agreeing. I'm very pleased with how this went. I somehow
Me too.
I did kind of think that you'd have an appreciation for Jupiter Ascending, at least for what it was going for, but
Yeah.
like me, it's like, yay, we see what's good, but yeah, you made a few mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
So,
if only with the Wachowskis, if only they could go into a project
mhm,
with their creativity, their style,
mhm.
and get a really good script. Someone that is just really good with dialogue and very good with the script and kind of combine the two.
Yes.
That's what I would love to see. I really would because
Matrix 4 is going to be
um
interesting.
and again, I know I didn't want to, I said I didn't want to keep ranting, but I I am so damn curious about how this is going to go. I really am
Me too.
because there is the anticipation and excitement for it, but there is also the dread because they're revisiting a franchise where, and again, I'm talking more about the
Mhm.
original. It was just so good and such a game changer in the genre and in film,
Mm.
that I would just hate for this one to do anything more to tarnish that legacy. So I'm really nervous but hopeful, so
Yeah,
we'll see.
I'm of the populace that don't believe we needed a fourth film. It feels
Hmm.
completely unneeded considering where the third one ended. But then again,
Yes.
thinking on that when there was that part in the third film where it's like you're not the first chosen one. There's been
Hmm.
others and more will come. So it's like, you know what, you can work with that. That is
You're
something
right.
you can work with. So
Yep.
I don't hate the second and third film as much as other people do. I mean, there's
Hmm.
still
Me
parts about
neither.
them I don't quite understand, but I think they're so much fun.
Hmm.
The action is fun.
They are.
The
Hmm.
effects are fun. Obviously there's some CGI that is a bit off in them, but we've now come a long way since then. So I'm thinking,
Yes.
so I don't know what to expect in terms of screenplay, and I am a bit concerned about that. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in terms of visuals, they're gonna knock it out of the park, and
Mm-hmm.
because now they have even more technology to play with.
Right.
So I feel like we're probably gonna be in for some things we haven't seen before, or at least
I
I
hope
hope
so.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's just the screenplay that has me a bit concerned. But I, even if I don't like the idea of there being a fourth film, I love the first three. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
definitely on board for a next one. But that is going to be where we're ending this episode. If you are not already subscribed to the NightWatch Zone, you will find links in the description box to all of Night's stuff, his social media, his YouTube channel, his address, his zip code, um,
No.
his retirement fund. Uh,
We're not going that far, right?
his OnlyFans. Um, I mean, wait, what? No. Also, you'll find links to socials and channel details for my friend Dan Jensen, who makes all the thumbnails for this series, because I'm okay with thumbnails, but there's some stuff that I cannot do. And so I call on his assistance. So I thank you for making another thumbnail for this episode. Arigato.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Dan.
Um,
Awesome stuff.
he is, I know. And I can't believe
Hmm.
how we just managed to coordinate without even trying. But thank you to everybody who has tuned in for this episode. Be sure to leave comments below. What are maybe some episode themes that you would like Night and I to tackle in future episodes? Let us know what you thought of these films. And we will happily, hopefully, see you in the next episode. So until then, guys, bye.
See ya.